Heya, this is
The Undulating Knights.
it's a game I made for Juniper Dev's very serious game jam, and it was probably one of the hardest game jams I've ever done, with a lot of big changes mid-development, including an entire swap in genre, all for a pretty stupid reason. So let's talk about it. Now, first of all, the theme for this game jam was Spin to Win, and I don't know why, but I got totally stuck on this theme. It's not anything too unconventional. In fact, I've even joined the jam before that had almost the exact same theme, but I guess I was never one to learn from my past experiences. Oh, and another thing to consider was the, gimmick of the jam, which is that in addition to your game being rated on all the standard stuff like visuals and enjoyment, there's also seriousness. I have no idea what this is supposed to represent. I get it's a part of the whole bit, but does that mean it's sarcastic and it's actually the opposite of it? Yeah, okay, I didn't really think about it too hard. Anyway, since I couldn't think of a decent idea, I decided to draw the player character first and see if that could give me some ideas. And after a bit, I ended up with this knight looking guy, which reminded me of Souls-like games, and by extension, dodge rolling. So I came up with a genius idea, or that's what I thought at the time. A Souls-like boss fighting game, but you have such a strong dodge roll that once you start rolling, you can never stop. I thought it could be funny. So with that, I started coding the player controller. It's allowed to reuse certain parts of previous games you made, so I took most of the code from another top-down action thing I made, but I replaced the dash with an infinite roll, which turned out to just be a matter of removing the timer that makes you stop moving after a amount of time. Now, stuck in a perpetual loop of rolling for the rest of eternity is cool and all, but I realized you need a way for the roll to actually end, so I made it so bumping into a wall stops you, and probably gives you brain damage. And then I added a simple directional sword swing as an attack. So far, it's looking pretty standard, but let's get into the part where it all started to go, wrong. After finishing out the player, I decided to make a short tutorial sequence to introduce the mechanics. So I made this little tile set and created this area. It's mostly just a bit of text here and there, but for the part that introduces the dodge roll, I wanted something that explained the mechanic in a memorable way. So my idea was to make a seemingly simple segment where you had to jump over some spikes using a roll. Though that's how that makes sense actually. But because of your infinite roll, you end up totally overshooting it, and that's how you learn about how the roll works. It'll be like a short little gag, and it won't take too much time to make. Okay, so I ended up putting an embarrassing amount of time into this one joke. As you might have heard, I made a song just to play during the space sequence, and I also made a song for the part before that, so there's a nice transition. And I even made a bunch of safety measures so you can't accidentally screw up the part. For example, I didn't want people rolling it the wrong way, so I created an invisible trigger that automatically sets which direction you'll roll next. And once you get to the other side, I didn't like that you could just roll back to where you started, so there's another trigger that blocks off the exit, so you're probably stuck there. Now, all of this sounds fine and dandy, but the big problem is that I spent multiple days hyperfixating on this first section of the game, and at this point, I've yet to work on any of the actual combat or gameplay. And because of this, it took me far too long to realize that, wait a minute, this idea sucks. First of all, if you can't stop yourself after roll, that's spin to lose, not spin to win. But more importantly, rolling infinitely is basically just annoying and doesn't add anything to combat. If I wanted it to work in the Dark Souls way of giving you invincible frames while rolling, it will kill all tension after every dodge roll as you just slowly wait to bump into a wall and walk back to the boss. I tried to think of a way to make it more interesting, but it doesn't really work for any kind of action game, to be honest. I would have loved to simply scrap the infinite roll or rework it to something more good, but as I told you before, I spent way too much time crafting an elaborate gag around the infinite roll thing, so changing that would mean sacrificing a bunch of work. So in short, I was in a bit of a pickle. Either I scrap this stupid intro gag, or I somehow find a way to keep the dodge roll mechanic. And my solution was to keep the stupid intro and completely ditch the idea of a Souls-like or any kind of combat system. The only genre I could see this weird main mechanic working was some kind of puzzle platformer, so I spent around a day transforming the entire genre of the game. So the first thing I did was to add these bottomless pits as a simple obstacle. You have to roll over them, and if you walk or fall into them, they send you back to the start of the room. The next thing I did was to change how the camera works. The camera just followed the player around before, and that's still true in the starting section of the game, but for puzzle rooms, I figured that a room-based camera would be better suited, since it's much easier to focus on the rooms themselves. Thankfully, I made something really similar in an abandoned project of mine. Let's just copy that over, and I just recreated Zelda, didn't I? Anyway, you might have already noticed, but I made a new variation of the tiles that I made before. I found it a bit weird to have traveled through space only to see the exact same scenery. So yeah, though it looked a bit weird on the surface, so I isolated them in this cave section instead. So with most of the pieces done, time was running out, so I hastily made some puzzles. I've actually never made a puzzle game before, so most of the puzzles end up being less about logical thinking and more about, just figuring out that you can do certain things, like roll diagonally. Though I was in a rush, I did manage to sneak in a few extra mechanics to spice things up. First of all, I made these slime tiles. You can walk through them normally, but they act like walls when you're rolling, which can be a good or bad thing. And after making that, I realized the sword swing from earlier was completely useless right now, so I made these switches that have to be activated with your sword. I would explain what it does, but this is honestly such a puzzle game cliche that you probably already know what it does. Okay, so after finishing an acceptable amount of puzzles, I made this extremely high effort ending screen and made an itch.io page. I thought for the game page, it would be funny if I pretended like the game was still a Souls-like, so I made this really derivative logo just for fun. And yeah, I was done. This game definitely turned out fine. I think the results and comments I got really sum up how the game ended up. Keeping the opening thing definitely paid off, no regrets there, but I really wish I could have spent more time on the gameplay, since it just felt a bit underwhelming and generic. It's kinda just a throwaway gag with like a 2-minute long mediocre puzzle game attached to it, which it's not a bad place to be, but I wish there was a little bit more. But yeah, that's about it for this video. If you want to play the game, the link is in the description, though now that you're completely spoiled on the opening, there really isn't much left. Okay, goodbye.